Who wants to be hands? Okay. So hi, I don't know a lot of you. I'm Lisa Solomon. I'm a new kindergarten parent, and I'm also learning to never say yes to June ever again. So not only did he say, oh, just come and talk about whatever you want to talk about, no mention of Seinfeld, no mention of the soup Nazi, definitely no mention of George Carlin, so the answer is going to be no from here on out. Okay, so what am I going to talk about? June said, just talk about what you do. People just see you at drop-off, maybe. Just talk about what you do. So I said, well, I do this thing called scenario planning, where I help organizations think more creatively about the future. He said, that sounds cool. I said, really? He said, yeah, do that. And then we were talking about a week ago, and I said, okay, June, so this thing is coming up, and I'm excited. I'm going to talk about scenario planning. He said, yeah, and tell them something about yourself, too. Like, make it meaningful. What? Do what? Make scenario? Oh, well, okay, so here's my effort at trying to talk about something I'm really passionate about, thinking about the future in creative and expansive ways, helping you learn something, and also sharing a little bit about what I get excited about and what has meaning for me. So, first thing you need to know about me, in the spirit of learning about me, is that these are my two girls. So Samantha is the kindergartner who just started, and Toby is my older daughter who goes to the local public school in Menlo Park. So we are first time in Wave of Parents, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here, and it's fitting to give this talk tonight, ending school next week. So I decided on the fly at about midnight last night to rename my talk, because scenario planning, designing conversations about the future, I didn't think, and I'm glad I did this, would be as fitting to follow the soup Nazi. So instead, I'm renaming it on the fly, called All I Needed to Learn. I learned in kindergarten, and because I'm now in Silicon Valley, it's 2.0. Right? So this is essentially, for all you technology people, a speech that's a mashup of what I like to do and honoring my kindergarten experience at Nueva. So here goes. Okay, first thing you need to know about scenario planning is that it's been around for decades. It's actually started in the 1950s. But I love this quote from Stuart Brand, who Steve Jobs talks a lot about, did talk a lot about in the Stanford speech, among others, and was a co-founder of the company I worked at for many years. And he talked about today's moment used to be the unimaginable future, right? Many of us didn't imagine having kids, right? Or didn't imagine what our lives would be like. So that's really profound to think about that what we're thinking about in the future really seems unimaginable. And I think there's no better way to understand scenario planning and the unimaginable future than to take us all back to 1965 and the Jetsons. So while Steve has not yet founded the flying car that takes 0 watts of energy, so we're working on that, Steve, there are some things that you can find about the unimaginable future in the Jetsons. For example, George talking to his boss Cogswell through telepresence, right? My 9-year-old is now Skyping with her grandmother every week through something that was unimaginable. We have Rosie the robot, right? How many Roombas in the room, right? Right? And you can't open up a newspaper within a week without seeing something about how, like, robots are going to take over the universe. How many people here have a Sonicare, right? My daughters do not know how to brush their teeth. They know how to stand here, beep, 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 right? They don't even know that, right? Can you imagine how ridiculous this was in 1965? And finally, we have wife Jane, who basically makes dinner the way I make dinner, right? Beep. Hey, it's homemade ziti. Trader Joe's via the microwave, right? These are unimaginable things back in 1965. So scenarios are essentially stories about the future. But they're not just like sci-fi stories of the future. They're actually based on events happening today, right? You can kind of read the paper, unpack what's going on, rearrange in interesting ways, and try and imagine how that might play out in the future. I mean, that's a little bit of what Steve is trying to do about what is the future of energy. What might it take for us to reimagine a different future of energy? There are 3 core principles that you need to know about scenario planning. One is that it takes the long view. So typically scenario planning is about 5 years out or longer. I think that the record at Global Business Network where I worked was a 10,000-year scenario on the future of nuclear waste. Luckily, I did not work on that project. But it is typically a long view, not next quarter, not next year, but 5 years or out. The second important part that you need to know about scenario planning, what makes it different, is that it starts with what's happening in the world around us and then goes back in, right? Most companies, most organizations start with what are we good at, right? And how do we compete? And now, will the customers even like us? So scenario planning says, what's happening in the world around us? How might that impact the industry that we're in? And ultimately, what are we going to do about it? It's a totally different way of thinking about it. And finally, in order to do that, you need to bring in outside perspectives, right? It's almost impossible to try and do this only internally within the people that you're used to seeing every day. You've got to mix it up. And it's fun because this Nueva Parent community is about mixing it up. So it is really exciting to think about what we can all do as scenario planners. So why does this matter today, right? And why am I so passionate about this, not only as a process, but truly as a leadership skill? And honestly, as a leadership skill, I think all Nueva kids are getting, and we're going to get to that. It matters because this is the world that they're inheriting, right? They're inheriting these wicked problems. They're inheriting problems that are not only difficult, they're novel, they're messy, they're complex, they have issues that are rooted in each other, and anytime you try and address it in one way, you have unintended consequences in another way. You have no idea if you're making progress. It's crazy making. But we're seeing more and more of these issues come up. In fact, the world kind of looks like this, which is fairly nauseating. Each one of these is just unpacked with wicked problems, and traditional processes won't solve them. You have to flex your creative mind. I just want to say it's not about predicting the future, as tempting as that is, but it helps you see the world differently, right? It's about reimagining different combinations. And I like to say that when you go through a scenario planning process, you literally never read the newspaper again. You are born-again conspiracy theorist, right? Everything has patterns, everything is scary, everything has big implications, and it's almost hard to get up without knowing you're going to have a drink at the end of the day. But what's interesting about it is that it forces you to break out of the assumptions that you have. And this is one of my favorite books in our house, Duck Rabbit, and I don't know how many people have this or have seen it in the library, but it's this awesome narrative between two kids that are having an argument whether this creature is a duck or a rabbit. And the way they figure it out, they don't just duke it out, they kind of are trying to deduct from various situations that they see, like what's happening with this creature. So for example, there's one picture where those long things are in water, and one kid is going, you see that? The rabbit is really hot, and he's trying to cool off. And the other kid goes, the duck is thirsty. Give the duck some water. Right? And so there's all these different scenarios that they're trying to figure out what is this. And at the end, because kids are the way they are, the one kid says, you know what, I think you're right, it's a duck. The other goes, you got it, it's a rabbit. And this is a particularly exciting book in my house because my daughter thinks she is the mother of a duck. And just to show you how unbelievably creative kids are, we were reading with Ducky one night, my grand duck, and she looked at me and she said, Mommy, I just don't think I'm Ducky's mommy. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, Ducky has blue eyes, and I do not. I have brown eyes. And I said, that is a different way of looking at it. I did not realize that. You're right. But I still think, we got biology. I still think you'd be Ducky's mommy. But the point is that we can learn from our kids about how to see perspectives because we don't even realize how locked in we are. And in order to actually, again, reimagine the future about, say, how to solve energy, you have to unpack your assumptions. And Roger Martin talks about this in this book called The Opposable Mind, where he says, look, we go through school trying to learn how to build an argument and then defend it. And in fact, what we actually need to do is learn how to take it apart and recombine it in interesting ways. So Louis Pasteur says, chance favors the prepared mind. So again, this is not about predicting the future, but you do scenarios so that you can be more quick to react when you start to see some events unfold. And by the way, this doesn't need to happen in business. This can happen around your vacation. This can happen around your family planning. So we could talk about that later if that's of interest to you. Ultimately, that says that, and this is a great science fiction writer, and science fiction writers tend to be awesome scenario planners, right? Ray Kurzweil, Singularity is like gold standard of scenario planners. But basically this notion of understanding that you have to reperceive how things will change. And again, I think that is exactly what is happening at Nueva. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Because designers are awesome at reperceiving change. And you know who else are awesome at reperceiving change? Kindergartners, right? So that's what we're going to talk about. Everything I needed to know, I learned in kindergarten. So how do we do this, right? And we're going to quickly go through this. So first of all, to be a great scenario planner, it starts with empathy. You have to realize that to talk about the future where you can't predict it is one of the scariest things you can ask someone to do. Hi, can we talk about something that you have no way you're going to be right about? And so what happens is that your brain shuts down and says, I don't want to do that. In fact, that feels really threatening. In fact, awful, no. Right? So in order to actually approach a big, scary conversation, you need to approach it with an empathetic mind. And you need to understand that most people are going to just want to like turn off, go into denial and uncertainty. So you have to frame it in a different way. Ta-da! We're going to talk about uncertainty. Would that work? Okay. So I thought, all right, I could talk about this in neuroscience, right, about how the brain maps this social pain as physical pain, but I think that these guys would do a much better job telling you about this. Oops.
Hello, I'm Kate. Now I'm coming.
This is from Heather's class.
From the new school. I'm here with Lauren to talk about the brain. Did you know you have a handy brain model right in your hand?
You guys can do it with them.
What happens when you flip your leg and how to repair it. When you have a split brain, it's hard to be mindful and alert. Can you explain the parts of your brain? Okay. Here's your spinal cord, like this. Here's your brain stem. Cool. Here's your limbic system. Love it.
Love it.
Amygdala.
Love it. Love it.
Here's your cortex. Love it. Here's your prefrontal cortex. Gone. Sometimes your amygdala explodes like a volcano with emotions and it flips your leg. Let me show you a few ways to repair
Okay,
this.
this is what I really want you to practice.
Butterfly tap.
Butterfly taps.
Take 5 between the breather. Snuggle.
Snuggle.
Rubbing someone's back. Hug. Once you repair your brain, you can use your prefrontal cortex to reflect.
Awesome, right? Next time you have a big, scary conversation about energy and how we're in 25 years, butterfly taps. All right. The next thing that scenario planning does really, really well is it challenges our status quo, right? I consider this the Tom Hanks moment in Big. Do you remember when he becomes an adult and they want his opinion on the toys, and this guy's talking about features and functions of the robot, and Tom Hanks just raises his hand and he goes, why is that fun? Why is that fun? Right? That is not fun. Scenario planning helps you answer that, the white elephant in the room, where you're just going down the path and we're going to ship this product and we're going to go on this trip and we're going to do all this and we're going to do it, and everyone's going, why would we do that? So this is a chance to step back and say, why are we doing that? And in Heather's kindergarten class, there was this huge, wonderful unit around Leonardo da Vinci where they practiced the Spadere Vedere, right? Which is essentially going up close and personal to say, why would we do that? And is there another way? So it's about honoring investigation, right? Challenging status quo by observing and asking the question. The third element of scenario planning, as we talked about, is bringing in diverse perspectives. And this is a model that we use where we make sure that we're looking at the macro trends, and we use the STEEP model to think about it. I love, this was the African unit that they just talked about, where within each society, they each got to play on different perspectives. There was the mathematician and the medicine worker and the weaver and the homemaker. And they got to work with each other to help understand from their perspective what needed to get done to support this society. So it was a great example, I thought, of sort of bringing in different perspectives and trying it on. Prototyping is a key element of scenario planning, right? You are literally prototyping the future. You are playing things out by putting your assumptions on the table and recombining that. And you don't need to be fancy to do it. You can use paper and Post-its, like, you know, and Sharpies, of course, like the best materials of our innovators. I mean, that's what kindergarten was about, right? They were just prototyping like crazy, everything, getting their hands on everything. One of my favorite comments was the first week Samantha came home from school and she said, there's hot glue. There is a hot glue gun. And you know what else? There's only one rule. The teachers can't do it for us. So, needless to say, she's been hounding me for a home hot glue gun pretty much since the start of school. So, they are already natural prototypers, which is excellent. Great scenario planning conversations are actually conversations to be crafted. They don't just happen, but they're really, in some ways, their own design challenge about making sure you have the right materials, the right context, the right people, the right setting. You can't read this in the back, but you know, these guys are learning conversations. Isaac, this is a meeting. In meetings, we talk about our societies, right? So this is just an example of how they're learning to talk about, important things. I won't go into that. And finally, great scenario planning is about storytelling. And this is actually a project from students. I don't think I mentioned that when I'm not at Nueva, I also teach at a new MBA in Design Strategy program at the California College of Arts. And we do an innovation project, and this is about reimagining the future of print media. And so this was a whole story about what could happen for all the people that are just never going to be on Twitter. And if you believe that Twitter is the future of your news, how could you reach all those people? And so they were sort of telling a story about reimagining Twitter in a whole different format. I just wanted to share this final video about storytelling and all the practice that our kindergartners have done. And again, this is from their culmination night in their big unit. Okay, we're going to move on. So it was a great story about how they were telling about Africa. But the point is, what got me really excited about this mashup is that these are the skills that I teach executives and organizations. It gets me so excited about how we're going to solve these big, complex problems. And this is exactly what our students are learning at Nueva, and it just makes me incredibly excited. Because ultimately, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so I would argue that this is probably the most important leadership skill that our kids are learning, is how to make the future. And they're learning it right from kindergarten. So just want to thank you for this opportunity. I want to leave it. Hold on one sec. I just love this video, and I wish I could tie it in, but you're just going to have to sit through it because it's the greatest. So, thank you.